There are moments in your life when everything feels ordinary on the surface, yet something beneath that surface begins to shift in a way you cannot easily describe. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it does not break into your reality with force. Instead, it arrives like a subtle awareness that something in your life is no longer fully aligned with the direction you are heading, and you may not even notice it at first. It begins as small hesitation inside decisions you used to make automatically, a quiet pause before responding to something you would normally accept without question, a slight distance between you and things that once felt familiar. And in that distance, something unfamiliar begins to form. Not fear, not confusion, but awareness. And awareness, once it begins to grow, does not remain silent for long. You may have tried to ignore it. You may have told yourself that life is simply busy, that every human feels this way sometimes, that nothing is wrong. But deep inside, there is a part of you that knows this is not just routine emotional fluctuation. It is something more structured, something more intentional, something that feels as though life itself is adjusting its direction around you. And this is where the warning begins. Not a warning of punishment, not a warning of fear, but a warning of attention. Because there are paths in life that do not collapse suddenly. They fade slowly, not because they are false, but because they are no longer aligned with who you are becoming. And the danger is not that you are moving in the wrong direction. The danger is that you might not notice when direction itself is changing. There are versions of yourself that you have already outgrown, but still carry out of habit. Ways of thinking that once protected you, but now quietly limit you. Emotional responses that once kept you safe, but now keep you repeating patterns that no longer reflect your deeper truth. And the most subtle part of this process is that nothing external forces you to let them go. Life simply begins to show you, gently at first, that they no longer fit as naturally as they once did. And if you pay attention closely enough, you begin to see that nothing in your life is truly random in the way you once assumed. There is a structure beneath your experience, not rigid, not controlling, but responsive. It reacts to your awareness, not your wishes. It responds to your readiness, not your desire. It unfolds according to a timing that does not always match your expectation, but often matches your capacity. And this is where many people misinterpret their lives. They assume delay means denial. They assume discomfort means something is wrong. They assume uncertainty means failure. But what if none of these interpretations are accurate? What if delay is preparation? What if discomfort is realignment? What if uncertainty is expansion into something your current understanding cannot yet fully contain? Because there are phases in your life where you are not meant to immediately understand what is happening. You are meant to become capable of understanding it later. And that becoming is not always comfortable. There are times when your inner world begins to feel heavier, not because something is wrong, but because something within you is being reorganized at a deeper level than thought can immediately interpret. Old emotional structures begin to loosen. Familiar narratives begin to lose their influence. And in their place, something quieter begins to emerge. A kind of internal honesty that cannot be ignored forever. You start noticing what you no longer resonate with. You start feeling where your energy is being drained without meaningful return. You start sensing where you are participating in patterns out of obligation rather than alignment. And these realizations do not always come with immediate solutions. They come with awareness first. And awareness, in its early stages, often feels like disruption, because it interrupts automatic living. There is a reason so many people resist this stage of life. Not because it is harmful, but because it removes the comfort of unconscious repetition. And unconscious repetition, even when limiting, feels safe because it is predictable. But something within you is no longer satisfied with predictability alone. It is asking for truth that is more alive than repetition. And truth does not always enter gently. Sometimes it enters as the feeling that something can no longer continue the way it has been continuing. Sometimes it enters as emotional exhaustion that has no clear cause. Sometimes it enters as a quiet inner refusal to fully participate in what no longer feels meaningful. And you may interpret this as confusion. But confusion is not absence of direction. It is proximity to a direction you have not yet fully recognized. There is a deeper intelligence moving through your experience that does not operate according to surface logic. It does not simply give you what you ask for in the timing you expect. It shapes your readiness. It adjusts your perception. It removes what cannot travel with you into the next stage of your development. And sometimes what is removed is not what you expected to lose. It is what you assumed was permanent. But permanence in human experience is often an illusion created by repetition, and repetition can end without warning when awareness shifts. This is why certain moments in your life feel like turning points, even when nothing obvious changes externally. Something internal has already crossed a threshold. Something within your perception has already moved forward, even if your external circumstances have not yet caught up. And in that gap between inner shift and outer reflection, you feel tension. That tension is not punishment. It is transition. And transition always feels unstable before it becomes coherent. There is something you must understand very clearly now. You are not being warned about external danger. You are being warned about internal blindness. The blindness that comes from assuming that what you have always seen is all there is to see. Because life is always larger than your current interpretation of it. And your interpretation is always evolving. And if you cling too tightly to old interpretations, you may miss the subtle guidance that is already adjusting your direction. There are moments when life does not shout at you. It whispers. And if you are too distracted by certainty, you will not hear it. You may already have experienced this in your own way. A situation that did not feel right even when it made logical sense. A decision that seemed correct on paper, but felt slightly misaligned internally. A path that looked stable externally but felt increasingly heavy emotionally. These are not random feelings. They are signals of alignment. And alignment is not always comfortable in the moment it begins, because alignment often requires the dissolution of what is misaligned. And what is misaligned is not always obvious until awareness increases. This is why growth sometimes feels like loss, because you are losing attachment to interpretations that no longer reflect your deeper awareness. And loss, even when necessary, creates emotional resistance. But behind that resistance, something more stable is forming. A quieter clarity. A deeper sense of direction that does not depend on constant external validation. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your relationship with your own life begins to change. You stop reacting as quickly. You begin observing more. You begin questioning less from fear and more from understanding. And in that shift, something important begins to happen. You start to see patterns instead of isolated events. You begin to notice that what once felt random actually has continuity. Not always visible immediately, but present when you look deeper. Even your delays begin to reveal structure. Even your disappointments begin to reveal redirection. Even your confusion begins to reveal preparation. And when this recognition begins to settle within you, something softens. Not everything becomes easy, but everything becomes more meaningful. And meaning changes how you carry experience. There is a version of you that is no longer driven purely by reaction. A version that pauses before concluding. A version that allows space between experience and interpretation. That version is not far away. It is forming through every moment you choose awareness instead of automatic response. And as it forms, something else begins to stabilize within you. Trust. Not blind trust. Not forced trust. But trust that emerges from repeated recognition that your life has not been as disconnected as it once appeared. And this trust does not eliminate uncertainty. It changes your relationship to it. Uncertainty no longer feels like absence of direction. It begins to feel like direction still forming. And that subtle difference changes everything. Because when uncertainty is no longer interpreted as threat, you stop resisting it in the same way. And when resistance decreases, clarity can enter more easily. And clarity does not always arrive as answers. Sometimes it arrives as simplicity, a quiet knowing that certain things no longer need to be pursued. Certain patterns no longer need to be repeated. Certain versions of yourself no longer need to be maintained. And this realization does not come from force. It comes from recognition. And recognition is irreversible in its effect. Once you see clearly, you cannot fully return to not seeing. And this is why this moment in your life matters more than it may appear on the surface. Because something in your perception is crossing a threshold between reacting and understanding, between surviving and aligning, between repetition and awareness. And in that threshold, life becomes less about control and more about perception, because perception determines experience more than circumstances do. And as your perception shifts, your experience shifts with it, even if slowly, even if subtly, even if without immediate external proof. And so you are being prepared, not for something to fear, but for something to recognize more clearly than before. A version of your life that you have not fully seen yet because you are still becoming capable of seeing it. And that capability is now forming, not all at once, but continuously, through every moment you pause instead of react, through every moment you observe instead of assume, through every moment you allow awareness to remain present even when certainty is absent. And in that presence, something begins to settle. A deeper sense that your life is not random, not chaotic in the ultimate sense, but unfolding in a way that is responsive to your internal development. And when you begin to see your life this way, even pain begins to shift in meaning, not because it is reduced, but because it is understood differently. And understanding transforms suffering more than avoidance ever could. And so this is your warning, not to fear what is coming, but to remain awake to what is already changing, because what is coming is not separate from what is already unfolding within you. And if you remain aware, you will not be overwhelmed by it. You will recognize it. And recognition brings stability even in uncertainty. And stability allows you to move without losing yourself. And that is what this moment is preparing you for. Not escape, not avoidance, but deeper awareness of your own becoming. And once you see it clearly, you will understand that nothing essential was ever hidden from you. You were simply learning how to see it. And now you are beginning to see.